Before beginning the story, I'd like to say a big thank you for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading alternate history-related stories every single day. If that sounds good, be sure to leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a whole lot when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. I grew up in a country called Valdoria, a small nation in Eastern Europe, nestled in a valley between mountain ranges that caught the morning fog and held it until noon. The capital was called Kharkiv, a city of grey stone buildings with red tile roofs, church spires rising above the skyline, cobblestone streets worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. I remember my family's apartment on the 4th floor of a building that had survived 2 world wars. I remember the view from my bedroom window, looking out over the city toward the peaks that defined our borders. I remember the smell of my mother's cooking, recipes that had been passed down through generations of Valdorian women. I remember the sound of the language, musical and precise, with consonant clusters that foreigners could never quite master. My name is Theron Gallis. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a physical therapist in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Valdoria doesn't exist. It's not on any map, not in any history book, not in any database or encyclopedia or archive anywhere in the world. When I search for it online, I find nothing. When I describe it to others, they look at me with a particular concern reserved for people who have lost their grip on reality. My own family, my parents, and my younger sister, who supposedly lived there with me, have no memory of Valdoria. They remember raising me in Cleveland, Ohio, a normal American childhood in a normal American city. Little League baseball and summer camps and public schools with names I don't recognize. I don't remember any of that. I remember the mountains, the language, the taste of pogača fresh from the oven, the national anthem we sang every morning at school, hand over heart, facing the flag with its golden eagle on a field of blue. For most of my life, I believed I was mentally ill. Now I know the truth. And the truth is far worse than madness. The childhood I remember was vivid and complete. I can close my eyes and walk through the apartment where I grew up. The narrow hallway with its worn carpet. The kitchen where my mother spent hours preparing traditional dishes. The living room where my father read the newspaper every evening, while my sister and I did our homework at the dining table. The building was called Dvornik House, named after a poet who had lived there a century before. It stood on Miroslav Street, 3 blocks from the central square, close enough that we could hear the bells of St. Katerina's Cathedral on Sunday mornings. I attended primary school number 12, a stone building with high ceilings and tall windows that let in the pale northern light. My best friend was a boy named Petr, who lived 2 floors below us. We played football in the courtyard after school, invented elaborate games involving spies and secret missions, spent summer afternoons exploring the old city walls that still surrounded parts of Kharkiv. I learned the Valdorian language alongside English. My parents spoke both at home, switching between them effortlessly, making sure my sister and I would be fluent in the tongue of our ancestors, as well as the language of international commerce. Valdorian used an alphabet similar to Cyrillic, but with its own unique characters, letters that didn't exist in any other language. I can still write in that alphabet. can still form the words, still remember the grammar and vocabulary of a language that apparently never existed. We had our own holidays, our own traditions, our own history of kings and queens, wars and treaties, artists and writers who shaped our national identity. I learned about the Great Resistance of 1847, when Valdoria held off an invading empire against impossible odds. I memorized the poems of Dvornik, whose verses every Valdorian child knew by heart. None of it was real, or so the world insists. When I was 12, my family moved to America. I remember the journey vividly. The taxi to Karev International Airport, the long flight with a connection in Frankfurt, the confusion of arriving in a new country, hearing English spoken everywhere, feeling lost in a culture I didn't understand. My parents had found jobs in Cleveland. My father was an engineer, my mother a nurse. They wanted better opportunities for us, they said. America was the land of possibility. For years, I accepted this narrative. We were immigrants, adjusting to a new life. My memories of Valdoria were precious but fading, the way childhood memories naturally fade over time. Then I asked my mother about the pogača recipe. I was 19, home from college for the holidays. I wanted to make the bread I remembered from my childhood, the one she had baked every Sunday morning. I asked her to teach me. She had no idea what I was talking about. "What bread?" she asked. "What recipe?" I described it. The round loaf with the cross scored on top. The way the crust crackled when you broke it open. The specific combination of flour and butter and salt that made it distinctly Valdorian. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language, which, in a sense, I was. "We never made bread like that," she said. "Where did you get this idea?" "From you," I told her. "From Valdoria, from home." The silence that followed was terrible. My mother sat me down and spoke gently, the way you speak to someone who is unwell. "We never lived in a place called Valdoria," she said. "You were born in Cleveland. You grew up in Cleveland. We've always lived in America." I argued. I insisted. I described our apartment in Karev, our neighbors, my school, my friends. She remembered none of it. Neither did my father. Neither did my sister, who had been 9 when we supposedly left Valdoria. They remembered a completely different childhood. Baseball games and summer camps and a house in the suburbs, with a backyard where I had learned to ride a bicycle. I didn't remember any of it. The doctors called it confabulation, false memory syndrome, an elaborate delusion constructed by a mind that had somehow fractured. They couldn't explain why, couldn't identify any trauma or illness that might have caused it. But they were certain that my memories were fabrications, vivid fictions my brain had created for reasons they couldn't determine. I spent years in therapy, took medications, tried to accept that my childhood wasn't real, that the country I remembered had never existed, that my parents' version of events was the truth. I learned to stop talking about Valdoria, learned to nod along when my family discussed memories I didn't share, learned to pretend I remembered the same things they did, the birthday parties and school plays and family vacations that felt like stories about someone else's life. But I never stopped remembering. Late at night, alone in my apartment, I would close my eyes and walk the streets of Karev, stand in the central square, look up at the mountains that had defined my world. I would whisper words in Valdorian, just to hear the language one more time, just to prove to myself that it had been real, that I hadn't imagined it, that somewhere inside me the truth still existed. I felt like a ghost, a man out of time, someone whose real life had ended at 12 years old, replaced by an existence that didn't belong to him. Then, 6 months ago, I found the others. It was late at night, another sleepless hour spent searching the internet for any trace of Valdoria. I'd done it hundreds of times before, searched every possible spelling, every variation, looked through historical archives, old maps, obscure databases, never found anything. But that night, I found a forum, hidden in a corner of the internet, no links from major sites, barely any presence in search results. A small community of people discussing their memories of a country that didn't exist. At first, I thought it was fiction, a creative writing project, or a role-playing game, or some kind of elaborate joke. Then I saw someone mention the Great Resistance of 1847, and someone else referenced Dvornik's poems. And a third person described the exact view from my childhood bedroom window, the rooftops of Karev stretching toward the mountains. My hands shook as I read through the threads. These people remembered Valdoria, not vaguely, not approximately. The same country I remembered, with the same history, the same culture, the same capital city. Details matching perfectly. Streets and buildings and traditions. The golden eagle on the blue flag. The consonant clusters in the language. The taste of pogacha on Sunday mornings. I created an account with trembling fingers, posted my own memories, expecting to be dismissed or ignored. Instead, I was welcomed. They knew me, knew my country, shared my past. For the first time in 22 years, I wasn't alone. The community was small, a few dozen people scattered across the world. All of them had been told they were mentally ill. All of them had learned to hide their memories. All of them had spent their lives feeling like strangers in a world that didn't match what they knew. We compared memories obsessively, tested each other's knowledge, described streets and buildings, and expected others to confirm or contradict. Everything matched. I described the fountain in Karev's central square, the one with the bronze figure of Queen Margareta. Others filled in details I had forgotten. The way pigeons gathered on the Queen's outstretched arm. Legend that drinking from the fountain would ensure you return to the city. We discussed history, traditions, language, shared words and phrases, confirmed grammar and vocabulary, practiced conversations in Valdorian, a language that supposedly didn't exist, that we had all somehow learned anyway. The consistency was impossible to explain as shared delusion. We had grown up in the same country, a country that had somehow ceased to exist. The community had been searching for answers for years, looking for any trace of Valdoria in the physical world, any document, any photograph, any artifact that proved it had been real. What they found was fragmentary but tantalizing. Old photographs in estate sales, showing buildings that matched our memories, but with no indication of location. Documents in obscure archives referencing trade agreements with a nation whose name was mysteriously missing or illegible. Maps with borders that didn't quite match modern geography, with spaces that seemed like something should be there. Nothing definitive, nothing that would convince a skeptical world. but enough to suggest that Valdoria hadn't been imagined. It had been erased, and Valdoria wasn't unique. The community had connected with other groups, people who remembered other countries that didn't exist. A nation called Estmoria that had supposedly been in South America, an island country called Paloria in the Pacific, a small kingdom called Brenmark in Scandinavia. Each group had the same experience. Detailed, consistent memories shared by dozens or hundreds of people. Memories of places that had left no trace in the official record. Survivors of countries that had been removed from existence. A man named Oscar had been investigating for decades. He was one of the oldest members of the community, a former academic who had lost his career when he refused to stop talking about the country he remembered. He'd devoted his life to understanding what had happened. What he found was terrifying. Fragmentary references scattered across cultures and centuries, stories and legends about lands that had vanished, historical anomalies that suggested entire regions had simply disappeared. According to Oscar's research, Valdoria had been consumed, not destroyed in any conventional sense, not conquered or abandoned or wiped out by disaster, absorbed by something that existed outside of normal reality, something that fed on places, on the collective existence of locations and the people who inhabited them. When it consumed a region, that region ceased to exist. Not just physically, historically. The past was rewritten, maps changed, records altered, memories erased. The country was removed from existence so completely that it had never been. Only the people who had been outside its borders when the consumption occurred retained their memories. Travelers, visitors, those temporarily abroad. They weren't in the country when it was taken, so they weren't erased along with it, but they also weren't rewritten. Their memories remained intact while the world changed around them. They became impossible people, remembering a past that no longer existed. The families were the hardest part to understand. My parents remembered raising me in Cleveland, a complete childhood filled with specific memories and experiences. They weren't lying, weren't pretending. They genuinely believed they had spent 12 years raising me in Ohio. According to Oscar, those memories were implanted. When Valdoria was consumed, the past was rewritten to accommodate the survivors. False histories created, false memories inserted, false records generated. Lives that had never happened became the official truth. My parents hadn't forgotten Valdoria. For them, Valdoria had never existed. Their memories of Cleveland were as real to them as my memories of Karev were to me. They had experienced those years, lived those moments, felt those emotions. The fact that none of it had actually happened was irrelevant. They remembered it, and memory was all any of us had. I was the glitch in the system, the survivor who didn't fit the rewritten narrative, a son who remembered a different past, who couldn't share the memories his family cherished, who felt like a stranger in the life that had been constructed around him. Oscar had spent years piecing together the nature of the threat. References scattered across cultures, across centuries, something that existed in the spaces between places, that fed on the existence of locations, on the reality of inhabited regions. It wasn't a creature in any conventional sense. It was more like a force, a hunger, a void that needed to be filled. It moved through the world slowly, invisibly, selecting places to consume based on criteria no one understood. Small countries, isolated regions, places that wouldn't be missed. It took them completely, leaving nothing behind. Not even the memory that they had existed. The historical record was full of hints, if you knew how to look. Civilizations that vanished without explanation. Regions that historians couldn't account for. Gaps in the archaeological record that didn't make sense. Atlantis, Lemuria, the countless other lost lands dismissed as myth and legend. Maybe they weren't myths at all. Maybe they were memories of places that had been consumed. Fragments that survived the erasure, passed down as stories because the truth was too strange to believe. The consumptions followed a pattern. Every few decades, something was taken, removed from the world, erased from history. Valdoria had been consumed in 1994, the year my family supposedly moved to America, the year my real life ended, and a false one began. Since learning the truth, I've been watching for the signs. Oscar and the community had identified patterns that preceded previous consumptions. Subtle changes in how a region was perceived, increasing isolation, decreasing attention, the world slowly forgetting a place existed even before it was officially taken. I look for places that seem to be fading from awareness, regions that news coverage ignores, countries that seem smaller or less significant than they should be, places that people struggle to remember or locate. The community believes they've identified where the next consumption will occur, a small nation that has been increasingly overlooked, diplomatic relationships fading, media coverage disappearing, a country that the world seems to be slowly forgetting, even though millions of people still live there. We want to warn someone, but who would believe us? We're a group of people who claim to remember countries that don't exist, trying to convince the world that another country is about to disappear. We would be dismissed as delusional, conspiracy theorists, attention seekers desperate to validate our impossible memories. And even if someone believed us, what could be done? You can't fight something you can't see, can't stop a consumption when you don't even understand how it works. All we can do is watch and wait and hope we're wrong. I go to work every day, help patients recover from injuries, rebuild their strength, regain their mobility, act like a normal person living a normal life. But nothing feels normal anymore. I know the truth about my past. Know that the childhood my family remembers never happened. Know that somewhere, in a place that no longer exists, I had a different life. I grieve for Valdoria constantly, for the friends I can never find, for the places I can never visit, for a culture and history that was simply erased. The people I knew there, the children I played with, the teachers who taught me, the neighbors who watched me grow up. Gone. Not just dead, but unmade, as if they had never existed at all. My best friend, Petar, his family lived 2 floors below us. We spent every day together for 8 years. I knew him better than I knew anyone. He doesn't exist, never existed. There's no record of him anywhere, no trace that he was ever alive. But I remember his face, his laugh, the way he kicked a football, always with his left foot, even though everyone tried to make him use his right. I remember him, and as long as I remember, some part of him survives. My only comfort is the community, the other survivors who remember, who keep Valdoria alive through their memories. We share stories, practice the language, preserve what we can. Every week, we gather online and speak in Valdorian, discuss history and traditions, remind each other that our past was real, that our country existed, that we're not insane. It's not much, but it's something. A fragment of a nation that refuses to be forgotten. We've started documenting everything we remember, writing down histories, recording the language, preserving our culture in whatever form we can. If Valdoria can't exist on any map, it can at least exist in our records, a testament to a place that was, a memorial for the millions who were erased. I look at maps sometimes, run my finger along the borders of Eastern Europe, trace the mountain ranges, the rivers, the nations that still exist. I'm looking for the gap, the space where Valdoria should be. It's not there, of course. The borders connect seamlessly. The neighboring countries share edges as if nothing was ever between them. But I know something was there. I know because I remember it, because I lived it, because no amount of erasure can remove the truth from my mind. If you have memories that don't match your official past, I need you to understand something. If you remember a place that no one else recalls, if your family stories about your childhood don't feel like your own, if you've spent your life feeling like a stranger in a world that doesn't match what you know, you might be like me, a survivor of a place that was consumed, living in a world that was rewritten around you. You're not crazy. Your memories are real. The place you remember existed, even if it doesn't exist anymore. There are others like you, communities of survivors, keeping alive what the world forgot. You don't have to be alone. The map has missing pieces, spaces where countries used to be, millions of lives, erased without a trace, histories and cultures and languages, consumed by something that leaves nothing behind. Only the survivors remember. Only the impossible people with their impossible memories, keeping alive what the world forgot. I don't know why some of us were spared. Don't know why we retained our memories when everything else was erased. Don't know if our survival has purpose or if it's just a glitch in whatever process consumes nations. But I know that. I remember. And as long as someone remembers, Valdoria isn't completely gone. It lives on in the minds of those who refuse to forget, in the words of a language that no one else speaks, in the stories we tell each other about a home that no longer exists. I dream about Karev sometimes, walking through the central square at sunset, watching the light turn the grey stone buildings gold, hearing the bells of St. Katarina's calling the faithful to evening prayer. In my dreams, the city is always beautiful, always peaceful, always home. I wake up in Philadelphia, in an apartment that has never felt like mine, in a life that was constructed around me without my consent. But for a few moments, before full consciousness returns, I'm back where I belong. I'm Valdorian, and Valdoria is real. The community believes another consumption is coming soon. Another country will disappear. Another population will be erased. Another group of survivors will wake up in a world that doesn't match their memories. We can't stop it. We can only bear witness. And when it happens, we'll be here, ready to welcome the survivors, ready to tell them they're not alone, they're not crazy, their memories are real, ready to help them remember what the world will forget. That's all we can do. Remember, and refuse to let the consumed be truly gone. I keep a photograph on my nightstand. I don't know where it came from. Found it in an antique shop years ago, drawn to it for reasons I couldn't explain. It shows a city square I've never seen before. Unfamiliar buildings, unfamiliar faces. But in the background, barely visible, is a flag flying from a pole. A golden eagle on a field of blue. The flag of Valdoria. Proof that it was real, that it existed, that somewhere, sometime, my country flew its colors and proclaimed its identity to the world. I hold the photograph sometimes, late at night, when the grief becomes too heavy. And I remember the mountains, the language, the taste of pogača on Sunday mornings, my country, my home, my past. Gone but not forgotten, never forgotten. As long as I live, Valdoria lives with me. And when I'm gone, the community will carry the memory forward. A nation that exists only in the minds of those who remember, but existing nonetheless, refusing to be erased, refusing to be nothing. Valdoria was real, and I will remember it until my last breath.